Hey guys, it's Steel here with another training room video, this time on communication in Counter-Strike. Thank you to Dan Himmelstein for the ideas for this video.
Hey, this is Steel, and in this video I'm going to talk about communication in Counter-Strike. So communication isn't just the in-game call-outs that players make in a team. Communication encompasses all correspondences between players, and in certain cases, the coach or management structure as well. Part of communication is how the players are able to pass ideas around outside of the game, and part of communication is how players are able to talk to one another about non-gaming related topics. Communication is also the thing that decides whether a team will get to the next level or if the team will disband. Some people are naturally very good with communicating, and others will need a lot of work at becoming better communicators. Sharing ideas, strategies, feedback, but more importantly, listening to your teammates are all factors of communication that any long-lasting and successful team requires. From the very creation of a team, players will be assigned the positions on maps, and the foundation of the team will start to get built. It's in these stages that making sure everyone is on the same page is the most important. If the very foundation that you've built the rest of your ideas upon is faulty, then the whole structure might collapse in the future. It is imperative to go into detail about what everyone's roles and responsibilities are. This is part of communication that gets overlooked, and in many cases, people think, oh, how hard can it be? I'll just play this spot. But there's no depth to the conversation, and the way that the person might be playing it might be inefficient or uncomplimentary to the other players or the whole team. So when I first started playing professionally, individual players did not spend a whole lot of time evaluating and adjusting their communication. Certain individuals would realize comms as a whole, in general, would be bad, but it was rare to actually listen back to the communication and actually hear what was actually happening without any selective memory or bias. So if you think back oh yeah, no, my comms were fine, then you watch it back and you're like, oh wait, no, that wasn't that good. So listening back to recordings can clear up petty arguments or allow you to realize how clear or concise your comms actually are, but it's a process that's overlooked as a low priority concern. After all, everyone wants to just play, get those reps out. Getting better at the game is the most important thing, and they're just communication, how hard could it be? So more recently, I've found that watching back or listening back to recordings of matches is very beneficial to myself as an IGL, but as well as a player. So it's amazing how many things that you actually miss when you're in the zone, and seeing how precise or imprecise your calls are it's actually a sobering experience. So there are many times that communication's missed because too many things are happening at the same time. So in my experience, I'm able to tune out certain comms and pay more attention to the voice that I need to pay attention to. For example, if I'm playing the B bomb site on Inferno, I'll listen to my teammate at Banana, and I'll have his voice in my head as a high priority speaker, and then someone at A is a low priority speaker. So if the guy at A is calling a setup for his teammate, I'm not really paying so much attention to that. But this also works against me because I've tuned out this player at A now, and he might have something very important for me to say. So he might call, for example, how many players or enemies are over at the A bomb site, and if that would basically cue in my head, hey, I should push and flank now, or I should early rotate back over to A now, I might miss that because I'm so focused on what's happening at B and only just focusing on my B teammate's voice. So over communicating can cause issues with being unable to hear footsteps, but for the most part, I would rather take someone who communicates too much than someone who doesn't communicate enough. Information in Counter-Strike is one of the most important and powerful things to have. Knowing how much space you have based on how many enemies there are at different parts of the map, what types of weapons they have, where might they have ops, etc. It will dictate how I'm going to approach the situation, where I'm going to push, play from, peek, angles, positioning, rotates, flanks, everything. So there are times that over-communicating will have an adverse effect by distracting your teammate who's trying to focus on their own game, but the times that over-communicating is more beneficial far outweighs the bad. So I'd rather have someone who overcomms, because the times that overcomming will hurt the team is much less than overcoming will help the team. Information is essential not only for the in-game leader to call a proper mid-round reaction, but also for individuals in playmaking or lurk positions to know exactly how much pressure to apply, whether they should commit for a kill or yield a bit and cause a distraction for teammates, and know which areas will be uncontested so that you can take free map control. There are lots of keywords in Counter-Strike. When calling tactics, I've used words such as contact, explode, pop, exec, fake, pinch, wrap, contain, lurk, rat, force buy, eco, light buy, pistol half. The list goes on. A pop, for example, would mean that a flashbang or a series of flashbangs would go off and players would be running in either immediately after the first flash explodes, or they'd be running in, looking at a wall or the ground as a series of flashbangs are going off above them, which would mean that which would create space for the lead players to get into advanced positions. A contact round would mean that you silently walk into an area with your guns out, and the only time you would break silence is when the enemy spots you. These rounds are so powerful when you're not facing against an opper, because the only way that you can really deal with that is have a really good crossfire setup already established, or a setup where one guy spots and another guy has a grenade out, probably a flashbang, maybe an incendiary. If you walk into an op, the opper will probably get the kill on you, but if you're taking a rifle versus rifle duel, the terrorist, especially with the trade potential of his teammates behind him, is in a very good position to be able to actually win those duels. To get the most out of an in-game leader, you need to feed them the most accurate information. So if the in-game leader is able to understand the setup of the enemy or see their tendencies, then it's easier for the in-game leader to adapt and call a tactic that will counter their opponents. For example, knowing if a player plays in a specific position every round as a CT, the IGL can call a tactic whereby you pop flash the specific player and get a free kill and a position advantage. For example, if I'm playing Inferno and my teammate that plays towards apartments every round calls that there's a counter terrorist that plays on the balcony every round, I can do a flashbang from middle that will blind that player. My teammate can go out the apartments and get that kill and maybe secure the pit. So communicating that idea to me is very beneficial, because now I can make that direct call to counter that player. This also works for the CT side. If you know that an enemy player likes to work an area alone every round, giving this information to your in-game leader can enable him to call for an opper to go and wait for the enemy player, or call for a flash and then push the player with two players. If an enemy player is used to being able to work an area by himself for free all the time, then making this adjustment can effectively take that player out of the game mentally, as his options will be limited and he'll be forced to adapt. Teams approach the in-game leader role differently. Most teams agree that one player will be the in-game leader, but not always is the in-game leader a good leader or an in-game leader by choice. Sometimes teams don't have an actual in-game leader, and a player on the team is forced to step up to the occasion, but the in-game leader is much more than a person that just calls tactics. Being an in-game leader is a mindset. It's the way you approach the game. It's the way that you learn, improve, and just running the team in general. I think that having a dedicated in-game leader is an important part of a team, although it is possible to have success without a dedicated in-game leader, and it's also possible to have success having people assume the in-game leader position temporarily. The most important part of the in-game leader position is that everyone buys into their system and that they have the final say on the strats. Too many cooks in the kitchen will be detrimental to a team. The best way to improve in-game communication is to record the communication and have all the players listen back to the recordings. The simple act of hearing the comms and being able to hear how little or how much they communicate will make them more conscious of their efforts the next time they play. This will fall into the four stages of competence, where the first stage is unconscious incompetence, where you don't know it's bad, and then once you play it back and then you hear it's bad, now you're able to work on it and then consciously make it good. Feedback is important in all facets of the game. Players need to be able to deliver and receive feedback to the in-game leader and vice versa. No team will be successful without open communication with regards to feedback. I think an important part of feedback is the ability to think critically and analyze what is actually happening in the game. If you do not fully understand the game, or the plays that are actually happening, your ability to deliver feedback will be stifled. I've encountered many players that were unable to deliver feedback purely because they were unable to process and examine what's been happening due to poor critical thinking skills. Players like this will always slow the growth of the team, as a lot of resources and time will be allocated into helping these players understand the situations better, and instead of progressing other aspects of the team, you're too busy focused on this one thing. It's the equivalent of having a 30-person math class and the teacher is ready to move on to the next section, but one student doesn't understand the content, so the teacher uses the entire class's time to break down the equations and make it easier to digest the information, then run practice equations on the chalkboard, all for this one person. Feedback is a tricky and delicate process. Some players respond better to feedback than others, and nobody wants to feel like they're attacked or not listened to. Being able to trust one another is also very important in a team environment, and every effort should be made to hear out one another. Being able to speak to one another candidly is important for team health. Players will trust and respect one another if they're able to be open and honest with each other. It's never fun to not know what your teammate is thinking, especially if you suspect that they're talking negatively about you behind your back. Don't let things fester and attack them head on. Communication isn't limited just to in-game communication. It's important to have conversations with your teammates about non-gaming topics as well as being open about important team discussions. While you may feel uncomfortable initiating a conversation, you'll feel a lot better clearing things up with your teammates, as you'll be able to establish trust and respect with one another. Everyone has a different perspective on a situation. It's important for everyone on the team to be on the same page and understand one another in every capacity available.
If you like this video, check out other Predator Training Room videos. You can check the links in the description below. There are advanced tips for advanced gamers, the next generation of esports. See ya.